Okay, let me introduce a second theory of integration, which is neo-functionalism. Theory of functionalism started with the history of European integration. In 1950s, after the Second World War, the German industrialization was quite amazing. And German people started to produce the tremendous amount of coals and steel. So they exported them with a cheaper price than other countries. So particularly the UK and France could not deal with the price of the German coals and German steels. So they started to talk about the integration of the economy of Western European countries. So the theory of functionalism started with the history of EEC, European Economic Cooperation. But 1960s and 70s, they expected the spillover effects out of the economic cooperation in the Western Europe, but they could not achieve any political integration. So in the case of Western Europe, the functional approach for the European integration turned out to be a failure. So new theory started, the so-called neo-functionalism. So let me define neo-functionalism now. Neo-functionalism aims at integrating individual sectors, hoping the spillover effects to further the process of integration. Spillover effects. So spillover effects must be utilized in order to further the process of integration. So it also put emphasis on growing economic interdependence and growing organizational capacity and to resolve disputes and supranational market rules. So also neo-functionalism also developed along with the development of the European integration. So in 1970s, European politicians and scholars thought functional approach is not enough for the European integration. So they thought about new functionalist approach, the so-called neo-functionalist approach. Strategy of the neo-functionalism. Compared with functionalism, neo-functionalism stresses the roles of politics. Politics should do something in addition to functionalist approach, seeking for the politicization of the spillover. In economic terms, spillover means the positive externalities in the non-economic area. But politicians and scholars in neo-functionalism stresses the spillover effects must be politicized. So the politicization of spillover connects the functional exchange and functional cooperation with political integration. So if people can politicize the spillover effect out of the sectoral cooperations in economy or society or social or cultural areas, they could expect later the prospects of political integration. So all this strategy reflected the failure of the EEC, European Economic Cooperation. Let me introduce arguments of neo-functionalism, particularly by Professor Philippe Schmitter. First, politicization of the spillover. It was Professor Schmitter who claimed the politicization of the spillover. Without political agreements or without the participants of the politicians, the spillover effect might cause either the spill back. Spillover means when you pour the milk milk spreads around, but spill back means the milk comes back to the bottle, spill back, or spill around. The milk does not spread. It stays right there. It stays right there. So without the political agreements, spillover effect might cause either spill back or spill around effects. In other words, he rejects the assumption of automaticity of the spillover effect, and he claims the politicization of the spillover. So he negated the automaticity of the spillover effects, and he claimed the spillover effect must be politicized. So he stressed the political roles by bureaucrats and creates the international ideology, and the creative leadership by political elites are crucial from the begin with. So he said that from the begin with, when the discussion of the political integration is started, political elites or bureaucrats must participate into those processes. They are very crucial. In other words, the spillover must be politicized. And then later they can reach any political agreements. Second argument made by Schmitter is the participation of political elites. So neo-functionalists argue that political institutions or political elites should participate into the integration processes from the beginning. So economists and businessmen and professionals, and as well as politicians, bureaucrats, political elites should start the integration discussions together. So, and also the supranational approach is needed. Supranational approach is needed. After the 1980s, many political and administrative elites participated the integration discussions in Europe. So finally, in 1993, the EU, the European Union, was created. So, question is it possible to apply the neo-functionalist approach to inter-Korean relations? The answer could be yes or no. Yes or no. Because the South Korean experience of economic cooperation with North Korea was pretty much conditioned or sometimes determined by the political affairs or by the political leader of North Korean system. So it is very difficult from the beginning with to start discussions with business people and the politicians at the same time. So far it is very hard to start to have the neo-functionalist approach in order to have peaceful integration in the Korean Peninsula.